Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. Eileen stood at the edge of the scorched battlefield, her armor battered and torn, her sword hanging loosely by her side. The kingdom she had once sworn to protect lay in ruins behind her, its towering walls now crumbled and blackened from dragon fire. She was the last of the dragon knights, the final remnant of an order that had once stood as the protectors of humanity. But now, they were nothing more than a distant memory, a legend buried beneath the ash and rubble of her failed kingdom. The betrayal had come swift and unexpected. Valthor, the most powerful of the dragons, had turned on them. Under his command, the dragons had torn through the kingdom, laying waste to villages, burning cities, and leaving nothing but destruction in their wake. Eileen had fought valiantly, but even she could not stop the devastation. Her dragon, Dracos, had been taken from her, his loyalty torn asunder by Valthor's dominance. "You failed us," the king's words echoed in her mind, spoken before he exiled her. "You failed the kingdom. You failed your dragon. You are no longer a knight." Stripped of her title, her honor, and her place in the world, Eileen wandered. Each step away from the kingdom felt heavier, her heart weighed down by the burden of guilt and loss. She had lost not only her dragon but her sense of purpose. Without Dracos, without the order of the Dragon Knights, what was she? A warrior without a cause, a protector without anything left to protect. Days turned into weeks, and Eileen found herself far from the war-torn lands of her former home. The barren plains gave way to untamed wilderness, where the scars of the dragon wars had not yet reached. She wandered aimlessly, her once gleaming armor now tarnished and caked with dirt. Her sword remained at her side, though she had little use for it out here. There were no dragons to fight, no enemies to vanquish. Only the silence of the forest and the sound of her own heavy breath. It was in this isolation that she first heard the whispers, tales of an ancient power hidden within the blood of humans, a power that had been long forgotten. The old ones called it the dragon scale, a latent force tied to the very essence of the dragons themselves. Eileen had dismissed the stories at first, thinking them nothing more than the ramblings of desperate souls clinging to myth in the face of despair. But the more she wandered, the more the legends seemed to follow her. Strangers in distant villages spoke of it in hushed tones, elders recounted the tales by firelight, and even the wind seemed to carry its name. It wasn't until she met Syra that she began to believe. Syra was an old woman, her face lined with age but her eyes sharp and bright with the wisdom of 100 lifetimes. Eileen had stumbled upon her small cottage deep in the woods, a modest home hidden away from the world. Syra had invited her in, offering warmth and food, a kindness Eileen hadn't experienced since her exile. "I know what you seek," Syra had said, her voice soft but steady as they sat by the fire. "You seek redemption. You seek your place in a world that has cast you aside." Eileen had said nothing, her eyes focused on the flames. Syra continued, her gaze piercing through the silence. "The dragons betrayed you. But the power to rise again lies within you. It always has. The blood of the dragon flows through your veins." Eileen finally looked up, her brow furrowed in confusion. "I am no dragon," she replied, her voice hoarse from days of silence. "I am human. The last of the dragon knights." Syra smiled, a knowing smile that sent a chill down Eileen's spine. The blood of dragons and humans has always been intertwined. Long ago, before the betrayal, there was harmony. A bond deeper than rider and mount. A bond of blood. The dragon scale is a part of you, Eileen. It always has been. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Eileen wanted to dismiss them, to reject the idea that she held any power beyond her sword. But something deep within her stirred, an ancient, primal feeling she could not explain. Syra stood, her movements slow but deliberate, and reached for a small vial on a shelf. She handed it to Eileen, the liquid inside shimmering with an otherworldly glow. "Drink this," Syra instructed. "It will awaken the power within you. But be warned, the dragon scale is not something to be taken lightly. It will change you." Eileen hesitated, her fingers tightening around the vial. She had nothing left to lose. The kingdom was gone, her dragon lost, and her honor in shambles. If there was even a chance that this power could help her reclaim what she had lost, she had to take it. With a deep breath, Eileen uncorked the vial and drank. The change was immediate and violent. Her body convulsed, her muscles tensing as the liquid coursed through her veins like fire. She gasped for breath, her vision blurring as the world around her seemed to spin. She fell to the floor, her hands clawing at the ground as the pain overtook her, and then, just as quickly as it had begun, it was over. Eileen lay still, her body trembling but the pain subsiding. Slowly, she pushed herself up, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She felt different, stronger, more connected to the world around her. Her senses were sharper, her reflexes quicker. She could feel the power pulsing beneath her skin, a raw, untamed force that had been dormant for far too long. "The dragon scale has awakened," Syra said, her voice soft but filled with awe. "You are no longer just a knight. You are something more." Eileen stood, her legs shaky but her resolve firm. She didn't fully understand what had just happened, but she knew one thing: she wasn't the same person who had walked into Syra's cottage. She was more than a dragon knight now. She was a vessel for something ancient and powerful. With her newfound strength, Eileen returned to the world of men. But the kingdom she once knew was no more. The once great city lay in ruins, its people scattered and leaderless. The few survivors who had escaped the dragon's wrath had fled into the countryside, forming small, isolated communities in a desperate attempt to avoid the dragon's notice. It was in one such village that Eileen met Kian, a young warrior who had risen as a leader among the survivors. He was fierce and determined, but also deeply distrustful of the dragons. When Eileen first arrived, her reputation preceded her, and the villagers viewed her with a mixture of awe and suspicion. To them, she was a remnant of a failed order, a knight who had once served alongside the very creatures that now hunted them. "You expect us to trust you?" Kian had asked, his arms crossed over his chest as he stood before Eileen. "You, a dragon knight, when it was the dragons who destroyed everything we had?" Eileen met his gaze, her voice calm but firm. "I do not ask for your trust. I ask for your strength. Together, we can reclaim what was lost. I have the power to tame the dragons once more, but I cannot do it alone." Kian scoffed, his eyes narrowing. "And why should we follow you? What makes you any different from the others who failed?" Eileen hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward. With a deep breath, she called upon the power of the dragon scale, letting it surge through her veins. Her eyes glowed with a fiery intensity, her body radiating with the raw, untamed magic she had only just begun to understand. "I am no longer just a dragon knight," she said, her voice steady and unwavering. "I carry the power of the dragon scale. With it, I can tame the dragons and rebuild what was lost. But I need your help." The villagers, including Kian, stared in awe at the display of power. For a moment, there was silence, and then, slowly, Kian nodded. "I'll follow you," he said quietly. "But if you betray us, if you lead us down the same path that destroyed the kingdom, I will not hesitate to strike you down." Eileen nodded in return. I expect nothing less. With Kian's support, Eileen began training the villagers, teaching them to harness the power of the dragon scale. Many of them were skeptical at first, unsure if such a power even existed within them. But as the weeks passed, more and more of them began to feel the stirring of magic in their blood. The power was weak at first, but with Eileen's guidance, it grew stronger, and then came the test that a wild dragon, one of Valthor's kin, attacked the village one night. The creature was massive, its scales dark as the night sky, its eyes glowing with malice. The villagers scrambled to defend themselves, but they were no match for the dragon's ferocity, but Eileen was. With a roar, she charged into battle, her sword gleaming in the moonlight as she faced the dragon head-on. The creature snapped its jaws at her, its wings beating the air with enough force to knock her off balance. But Eileen stood firm, calling upon the power of the dragon scale. She could feel the magic coursing through her, giving her the strength she needed. The battle was fierce, but Eileen fought with a determination she hadn't felt in years. She dodged the dragon's attacks, her movements quick and precise, her strikes deadly. And then, with a final, powerful blow, she plunged her sword into the dragon's chest. The beast let out a deafening roar, its body convulsing before it collapsed to the ground. Eileen stood over its fallen form, her chest heaving as she caught her breath. The villagers, who had watched in awe, began to cheer. From that night on, Eileen was no longer just the last of the Dragon Knights. She was a leader, a symbol of hope for a people who had long since lost it. The cheers of the villagers echoed through the night. Eileen stood in silence, her breath steadying. She looked down at the slain dragon, its immense body still, the glowing eyes that once held so much malice now lifeless. The victory, though necessary, felt hollow. Killing a dragon was not what she had envisioned when she first set out to reclaim the bond between humans and dragons. But there was no time for sentiment. This was only the beginning. Kian approached her, his usual skepticism replaced with awe. "You really did it," he said, his voice low, as if speaking too loudly might break the spell. "You killed the dragon." "I tamed it," Eileen replied, her eyes still on the fallen creature. "By force, yes, but the goal isn't to slaughter every dragon that crosses our path. It's to bring them back under control, to remind them of the bond they once had with humans." Kian frowned, glancing from her to the dead dragon. "How are we supposed to do that? The dragons don't seem interested in peace." Eileen sheathed her sword and turned to him, her expression resolute. "Not all of them. There are those who still remember the old ways, who haven't succumbed to Valthor's madness. We need to find them, and when we do, we'll have allies powerful enough to turn the tide." The days that followed were spent in preparation. The villagers, now emboldened by their leader's display of strength, threw themselves into their training. Eileen pushed them harder than ever, not just physically but mentally, encouraging them to dig deep into their bloodlines to awaken the dragon scale within. Some showed promise, their magic flaring briefly before fading. Others struggled to even sense the power, and Eileen knew time was running short. Valthor wouldn't wait long before launching another assault. Eileen spent her nights alone, communing with the magic that now coursed through her. The dragon scale had become a part of her, but controlling it was another matter. It wasn't like the bond she had once shared with Dracos. This power was wilder, more dangerous, and every time she used it, she could feel the temptation to lose herself in its raw strength. But she couldn't afford to falter now. The future of humanity rested on her shoulders. It was during one of these nights that Syra returned. Eileen had been sitting by the fire, her sword resting across her knees, when she heard the soft shuffle of feet approaching. She turned, hand already on the hilt of her blade, but relaxed when she saw the old woman step into the light of the flames. "You've done well," Syra said, her voice a low murmur. "But there is still more to learn." Eileen didn't respond immediately. She had expected Syra's return, though the timing couldn't have been more critical. "We're not ready," she finally said, her voice heavy with the weight of her responsibility. "The villagers are trying, but they're not soldiers. And even if they were, Valther's forces are too strong." Syra stepped closer, her eyes sharp as ever. "The strength you need is already within you, Eileen. But you must go further. The power of the dragon scale is vast, but it will only respond to those who fully embrace it." Eileen looked at the old woman, frustration flickering in her chest. "I'm trying. But how am I supposed to harness something I barely understand?" "You must understand yourself first," Syra said simply, her gaze unwavering. "The power of the dragon scale is not just about strength or control. It is about balance, about harmony with the ancient forces that reside within you. You've spent your life as a warrior, Eileen, fighting battles and wielding weapons. But this power requires more than the blade." Eileen's eyes narrowed. "And how do I find this balance?" "You must seek the heart of the dragon," Syra replied, her voice soft but firm. "There is a place, far to the north, where the oldest dragons still reside. It is there that the bond between humans and dragons was first forged. If you can reach it, if you can prove yourself, the dragons will listen. But the journey is dangerous, and few have ever returned." Eileen felt a cold shiver run down her spine. The heart of the dragon, she had heard of it only in ancient stories, tales told to dragon knights as legend. But if it was real, it could be the key to everything. She nodded slowly. "I'll go." Syra smiled, the faintest hint of approval in her expression. "You must leave soon. Valther's reach grows every day. And remember, Eileen, the path to power is not through domination. It is through understanding." The following morning, Eileen gathered her few belongings and prepared to leave. She told Cian of her plans, and though he was reluctant to let her go, he understood the importance of her mission. The village would be vulnerable without her, but if she succeeded, they would have the strength to stand against any threat. "Don't take too long," Cian warned, his face grim. "We can't hold out forever." Eileen clasped his forearm, a gesture of mutual respect. "I won't fail." She set out alone, her path leading northward, through the harsh and unforgiving wilderness. The journey was treacherous, filled with jagged mountain passes, frozen rivers, and predators that prowled the dark forests. But Eileen pressed on, her determination unshakable. The magic within her pulsed with a steady rhythm, guiding her forward. It was on the 12th day that she found it, the heart of the dragon, nestled deep within the mountains. The valley was unlike anything Eileen had ever seen. The air was thick with magic, a palpable force that hummed in her veins. Ancient, towering stone formations shaped like dragons loomed over the landscape, their surfaces etched with runes older than humanity itself. In the center of the valley stood a massive, glowing crystal, the heart. Eileen approached cautiously, her steps slow and deliberate. As she drew closer, the ground beneath her feet rumbled, and from the shadows, a figure emerged. It was not a dragon, but something far older, far more powerful. A being that radiated ancient magic, its form shifting between dragon and human, its eyes glowing with an inner fire. "You seek the power of the dragon scale," the being said, its voice echoing across the valley. "But power comes at a price. Are you willing to pay it?" Eileen stood tall, her resolve unwavering. "I will do whatever it takes to save my people." The being smiled, a slow, deliberate gesture. "Then prove it." The ground shook, and from the sky, a massive dragon descended, its scales glistening in the light of the heart. It was the largest dragon Eileen had ever seen, its wings spanning the entire valley. This was no ordinary dragon, this was the ancient guardian of the heart. The battle that followed was unlike anything Eileen had ever experienced. The dragon was relentless, its attacks swift and devastating. But Eileen, fueled by the power of the dragon's scale, fought with equal ferocity. She moved with a grace and strength she had never known, each strike of her blade imbued with the magic that pulsed within her. For hours they fought, neither side giving an inch. But slowly, Eileen began to gain the upper hand. She could feel the dragon's power weakening, its movements slowing. And with a final, decisive blow, she brought the creature to its knees. Breathing heavily, Eileen stood over the dragon, her sword raised. But as she prepared to strike the final blow, something stopped her. She could feel the dragon's heart beating beneath her blade, could feel its pain, its fear. Lowering her sword, she reached out with her free hand, placing it gently on the dragon's head. "I don't want to kill you," she whispered. "I want to understand." The dragon's eyes, once filled with rage, softened. Slowly, it bowed its head, submitting to her. The being watched from the shadows, its smile widening. "You have proven yourself, Eileen. You are not just a warrior. You are a leader." The heart of the dragon glowed brighter, and as Eileen stood before it, she felt its power wash over her, filling her with a strength unlike anything she had ever known. She had done it, she had gained the power of the heart. When she returned to the village, she was no longer just Eileen, the last dragon knight. She was the leader of a new era, an era where humans and dragons could once again coexist in harmony. The power of the dragon's scale flowed through her and her people, and with it, they rebuilt what had been lost. The war against Valthor was long and brutal, but with the dragons at her side, Eileen led humanity to victory. And when the dust settled, a new empire rose from the ashes, one built on the strength of both humans and dragons. Eileen stood at the edge of the new capital, watching as dragons flew overhead, their scales glinting in the sunlight. She had done what she set out to do, she had reclaimed the bond between humans and dragons. And in doing so, she had created a future where both could thrive together. The song of the dragon's scale would echo through the ages, a reminder of the power of unity, adaptation, and understanding.